MG Rob back with you, and today we got another MGB in the shop. Some of you might recognize this car as a car that I was working on when I first started my channel. So this is a low mileage 74B, only showing 31,000 miles on it, that the current owner found sitting in a garage when he was working on somebody's house, and it had been sitting here for a number of years. So we need to put a vacuum diaphragm on the distributor, and then he wants to put a new exhaust system on it because what's on there now is a replacement type with like glass pack type mufflers on it, and he wants to put an original system back on it, or at least what's available that's the closest to original. So that's what we're going to be doing to it. Well, let's get this thing up in the air. So the exhaust system we have on this car is actually was a fairly common style of replacement exhaust system because it was fairly inexpensive to make, so then they could put them on the market for a little less money, making them a good option for people on a budget. So basically it's just two bullet style or mufflers or glass packs that are relatively inexpensive, and then as we come up here, we got a second one here because originally it had a resonator here and a muffler in the back, and then the Y pipe here, or the merge, was just fairly simple, just dump in here. Didn't flow quite as well as the originals, but was cheaper and easier to make. So this is the exhaust system we're putting on the car. This is what's currently available from Moss. So the front pipe, the merge here, is very much like the original factory ones. The rear muffler looks very much like the original factory muffler, except this one actually has a chrome tip welded on it, which the factory ones didn't have. And this is the resonator that comes in the new systems nowadays. Now the original resonator would have looked more like this one here. This is an original one off of a later chrome bumper car. No one makes them like that anymore, so this is what you get nowadays. So I did go ahead and make sure I had the front and rear hangers and the brass nuts for the manifold. Brass nuts are much better to use because if you don't put brass on there, they can get frozen on there from heat cycling and rust, and it can be a real bear to get off, and you can break the studs off. But if you put the brass ones on there, then any later service becomes much easier. All right, one thing I forgot to say there was actually this resonator is very much like the 67 and earlier Bs, where they switched to the pinch style in 68. So I get this old transmission jack here, and I like to use this to support the exhaust system while I take things apart. Now from here I can start taking the hangers loose, and there's a little support bracket here off the transmission, and the bolts or the nuts off the studs of the manifold. So before you try to take the nuts loose at the manifold, you really want to soak them down with some penetrating oil, and preferably give it a little bit of time to soak in. The worse it looks, the more time you want to give it. Now, I do not suggest using WD-40 for this. that is definitely not the best application for that. These three, however, are all three much better examples for getting rusty bolts loose. All three of these work pretty good. So we got Freall, Aero Coil, and PB Blaster. Now in this particular case, with a low mileage car like this, those bolts really don't look that bad. But you really want to get something on there regardless of what they look like. It will be a lot easier in the long run to get them apart. In this case, I'm using the Freall, because I've been trying this stuff out lately to see how good it is in comparison to the other two. So while that's soaking, I'll go ahead and take apart the center hanger here and the rear hanger here, which it looks like it's still got the originals and they might be able to reuse them. I didn't know when I ordered the system what was on there for sure because I couldn't remember, so I made sure I had everything sitting here. Alright, now in order to get up to these bolts here, you really need to get a swivel and a long extension. I like this narrow one here because it gives you just a little bit more room to work with. Alright, so 5 of the 6 came off surprisingly easy. They don't get much easier than that. But we do have one up there that's giving me troubles, and I'll probably have to put a little bit of heat on it. Alright, just with a little bit of heat, that got it. And now it's ready to drop off. Now one little tip there too is sometimes when you get a bolt like that that's really hard to get out, actually tightening it first a little bit can help you to loosen it. So actually I almost forgot to take this bolt here out. Oftentimes this isn't even here. So it's easy to forget about it when you got a car that actually has it in place like it's supposed to be. There we go. All we got to do now is just drop it down. And that's it. All we got to do is now start putting the new one on. So before actually putting on the new one, you should always take a look at the threads here on all the bolts, make sure they all look good, which in this case they're actually pretty good condition. Because if they're all buggered up where you can't get a nut on them again, then you got to take the manifold off because most of the time because it can be really difficult to get out. And that entails taking the carburetors and everything off. And you also want to look at the surface here. Make sure there's no gasket material stuck inside there from the donut gasket to prevent it from sealing again. So, alright, now I want to make sure this is on the inside so that it can attach to the bracket there, which in this case they had it slid over the outside for some reason. And the gaskets, they have metal on one side and then fiber on the other. So we're going to put the metal towards the pipe so that the fiber goes against the manifold. Now once you get in there, these can be a bit of a pain to put in because you're working in a tight space. You're trying to hold these up over the studs and put nuts on them at the same time, and you can hardly get your hand on part of it at all. So they can be a bit fiddly to do. So I like to take my jack here get it up here close. Get it up here close to the height.
That way.
You can just rest the end of the pipe right on here, so you're not trying to support the whole thing while you're fighting the front part here. Then you get it up in place. And then start fighting to slide these up in there and get all the nuts on. Now at this point, I like to run those nuts on just far enough to where this doesn't move that much, but can still move a little bit. From here, now we can test fit the resonator. Now I find that 9 times out of 10, this stuff doesn't just slip right together and line right up. Oftentimes I find actually that these straps are sitting crooked and it doesn't let everything sit right, and then you got to really mess with them a little bit to get everything sitting the way you want it. What I'll do is I'll just stick a bolt through here temporarily and then set the other half on and see how the whole thing sits together before I adjust anything. Alright, now we slip the muffler in place. And we look at the whole thing as an assembly and adjust each piece to make sure everything's lined up before tweaking anything. Alright, so this one looks like it's taking a little longer than I originally anticipated it was going to, as far as the amount of time I'm taking videoing stuff, the amount of footage I have for it. So I'm going to split this video into 2 parts. So that's the end of part 1. So this is MG Rob. Later.